Welcome back to everybody. Police shootings, dog attacks, and high energy bills. We talked about these topics in the last half hour and how they're affecting San Antonio. And now we're going to get answers from the city's top leader, Mayor Ron Nirenberg.
He joins us now for the KSAT Q&A on the move once again here this evening. Mayor, thanks for being here. I want to first ask you about what, by our count now, is 5 San Antonio police officers shot in the last 12 days. We're waiting to get more information about what happened this afternoon on the southwest side. But in that time, there's been a lot of back and forth between the Bexar County DA, the city's police chief, about their coordination on these cases. Are you a part of any of these conversations about what is leading to some of these violent offenders still being out on the streets?
Sure, yes, and thank you for having me on. And so first, I do have to say this is a stark reminder of the circumstances and the challenges of being in law enforcement, and should serve as a reminder to this community that the folks that are doing this job are facing some of the most extraordinary circumstances and deserve our support. The second thing I would like to say is that it is completely unacceptable that violent offenders are continuing to perpetrate violence on our community and on members of law enforcement. So here's the challenge. It is a very complex situation. The city does not have control of the jail or the court system. We do have control over the resources that we provide to law enforcement. We're going to continue to provide support to SAPD to make sure they have the personnel and the equipment necessary to protect themselves and protect the public. I have spoken with Judge Sakai, and we both believe that this is not something that any of us should find acceptable. We will be convening all of the folks involved in every aspect of this, criminal justice and law enforcement, to make sure that we are identifying the processes that need to change to ensure that, again, violent offenders are not continuing to perpetrate violence on our community or on members of law enforcement.
You mentioned earlier today questions regarding how bonds are set, and that you were hopeful maybe that would be addressed at the state level. What are you hoping that lawmakers could do to make corrections there?
So, there are myriad issues involved in ensuring, number one, that folks get due process, but also that we have the most violent offenders who need to be behind bars staying there. And certainly the conversations about bail and bail reform have come up, started and stopped at the state level. I believe that's one of the areas that needs to continue to be addressed. But there's a lot of other things that we should be looking at. Folks who are, not everyone who is arrested ought to be treated the same in terms of their propensity to offend again. And so, perhaps we need to look at how the probation process works and whether some of the offenders who are out on parole need a little bit more attention, for instance, than others. So I think we need to get everybody involved. There are multiple levels of government involved in this. It's not all solely the responsibility of any one. It does go to the state level. It goes through all of the agencies here locally. And we need to make sure, the judge and I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to protect our public and to protect members of law enforcement.
You just mentioned protection. Unfortunately, we just had another dog attack today. We know a 46-year-old man is in critical condition now in the hospital after he was attacked by his neighbor's 2 dogs. We have spoken about this many times here on the KSAT Q&A about these dog attacks that have happened. We've had a rash of them this year. A lot of the heat has been on animal care services. But what can be done at this point? Or do you think that the onus really is on pet owners?
Well, again, there are multiple levels of responsibility here. And one that we are taking very seriously at the city is ensuring that we have enough resources to address dangerous dogs in our community, dangerous animals in our community. And so we have increased the animal care budget this year by 26%. It's waiting for council approval. I expect that will happen. But there's a whole host of things we need to do to make sure that owners of pets are being responsible pet owners. We've seen a number of attacks recently where the owner has ignored warnings from neighbors or has not spayed or neutered their pet, and so we're contributing to the pet population, overpopulation. There are strays that are simply just let go. So there's a number of things we have to do. First and foremost, to protect the public, we've got to make sure that ACS officers are fully staffed, able to respond to calls, and making sure that we have the resources necessary to take care of dangerous animals so they don't pose a threat to the public. I will say there's also responsibility here at the state, and very thankful that members of our own Barrett County delegation have filed pieces of legislation to make it easier for us to detain and remove dangerous dogs from owners. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed one of those important bills, but there's lots of areas of responsibility here. We're going to do what we can with our responsibility to make sure that ACS is properly resourced. There's going to be additional council conversations over the next couple of weeks before we approve the budget. I expect additional resources for spay and neuter to come up. So there's a lot of things that we need to be doing to address this issue.
Okay. So that budget vote is happening next week, and we talked a little bit earlier in the show about Councilwoman Melissa Cabello-Haverda's idea that she plans to discuss tomorrow, we understand, about the city basically taking less revenue from CPS Energy in an effort to try to prevent a rate increase, at least one, that the utility has planned. Is that something that's actually feasible for the city to do?
Well, so I would say that certainly interested in having a conversation about how we can be good stewards of resources. But CPS Energy is owned and operated is owned by the public, remains one of the most affordable utilities in the state. And if we don't ensure that they have proper revenue support to do the infrastructure upgrades that is necessary, then we're going to find ourselves in a serious challenge. I mean, this is underinvestment in utility infrastructure is why California is in such a world of hurt with regard to their electric utilities, electric and gas utilities. So CPS Energy is on good footing. If it were as simple as reducing the amount of revenue that is dividend back to the city as part of CPS's agreement with the city, we're going to have to find ways to reduce the city's budget on services that everyone expects. The initial calculation I understand from the city manager in terms of the revenue impact of going to 3% or dropping 3% in that share to the city would be the equivalent of about $90 million out of the city's budget this year, and then compounding that every year going forward. So it will be a challenge. Look, nobody likes to see rates adjusted, but costs rise, and we've got to adjust for that to ensure that the CPS Energy utility, which we all depend on, is performing adequately to keep the lights on and keep things moving in San Antonio.
Okay. Mayor Ron Nirenberg, thank you so much for joining us today. We know that you're on the go, so we appreciate you speaking with us today for our KSAT Q&A.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good evening.
Keep up to date with all of San Antonio's top news, weather, and so much more by clicking the like and subscribe buttons below. And once again, thanks for watching KSAT.